Yeah. Welcome into Classic Wax, brought to you by the Beat Sessions. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Hope you're all having a fantastic Tuesday. Hope the Thanksgiving holiday was good to all of you as well. Hope that you got to do whatever you wanted to do. I know, to each their own. You know, if you were looking to hang out with family, if you're looking to hang out with friends, if you're looking to just hang out by yourself, whatever it is that you were hoping to do, I hope that you got it done. And I hope that it gave you some respite and refreshed your spirit getting into more of this holiday season, because there's still a lot of it to come at us. But in the meantime, we got some classic wax. We got some fun stuff to talk about. I have an amazing record to talk about this evening. Very excited to be able to talk about the Beatles on this channel. It's obviously it's an opportunity that is not something that's going to come up unless I force it. So coincidence, we have a happy one here. Rubber Soul, released on December 3rd, 1965. It's been 59 years since that record was released. An incredible record. One of my favorites. It's one of my favorite Beatles records. I'll just say it. I think it's incredibly underrated. I think it receives a lot of criticism for being slow and bland, especially the American release. We're going to talk about a bit of that information here when we jump into it. But I think that record, aside from just musically being excellent, it marks a shift not only for that band, the Beatles, obviously, but the whole of popular music was getting ready to just take this whole new psychedelic ride. And this record, Rubber Soul, is it basically was the launching pad for just this incredible period, this incredible time for music and artists. So thrilled to talk about this record. Before we get into it, please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, do all the things to help me blow this project up in 2024. If you're not familiar with Classic Wax, just a couple details before we get into it. The only requirements for records that we talk about is that they must be released on the date that I do the show. So being December 3rd, this worked out well. Once again, a nice coincidence. And then the other bit of info is that the record's got to be 20 years older or more, obviously. And so the Beatles, Rubber Soul definitely falls within that category, within that range. And very excited to talk about it. Excited to talk about it in the context of a few other records today. That's also part of the show. If you're not familiar with it, we like to talk about some releases that have come out currently, contextualize things. They coincide with the album reviews that I put out. And I promise you, not Father John Misty, but Kim Deal, the album review is coming out. I was able to listen to it. I'm thrilled to talk about that record. We'll jump into that very briefly here, but that it's rendering like right now in front of me. It's actually almost finished. So as soon as the show is finished, I will post that. I'm excited to get it out and to hear all of your thoughts and to interact with all of you as well. And that is another thing. I started a membership spot on the channel today. It's 99 cents a month. So if you have $1 a month that you can spare, I'm going to start doing the deep cut of the day. It's going to be a daily selection of just really solid tunes, one tune a day. It's going to be about a 10-15 minute piece starting in the morning. That's 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But the deep cut of the day is just going to be another fun way for me to interact with you guys. I like the live format. I think there's not quite as much formality, and it's just great for me personally, not having as much free time these days and just getting in front of the microphone, being more comfortable and being more consistent for you guys. It's all part of the goal in building the channel and creating more content for you, interacting and just making this whole entity more engaging and more thought-provoking as well. And I appreciate all of you for the insight and the commentary that you provide. This channel, this community would be nothing without all of you. So thank you very much. We're going to jump right into it, actually. Let's talk about this new record from Kim Deal entitled Nobody Loves You More. Now, in the review, I was saying that this is, it's been a minute since we've heard from Kim. It's been about 6 years since the last Breeders record came out. And with the momentum of that band these days, going out on tour to support their the 30th anniversary of Last Splash, and also opening up for Foo Fighters down in Australia, and opened up for Olivia Rodrigo here stateside. That's huge. Playing big arenas, a venue, a place, an arena where I just feel like that they belong. Kim Deal is one of those artists that has been so influential over the years, whether with the Pixies, whether working with the Breeders. I feel like her work with the Breeders is definitely much more prolific, but it's great to see her put out solo work, and to keep it rooted in her style, but also to branch out and to do some fun stuff. And we were talking about Father John Misty last week. I'm going to talk about him a little bit this week as well. But his last record, Chloe in the Next 20th Century, and many other records that have been released within the last few years, really playing with the essence of mid-century pop, really tapping into the jazz standard and the big band idea. And oftentimes I think the flair is excellent. I think that to each their own, and it's certainly a mood requirement for me. I can't just throw on, big orchestrated compositions, especially an album's worth all the time. It's just not my style. It's not always necessarily where my head is. I definitely need different types of music to just to carry me, to get me through. But I think the influence is cool. I think people tapping into this classic sound and finding, and in this case, both Father John Misty and Kim Deal just rocking out, but being able to arrange those rock and roll sounds, in really nice layered compositions with, old school orchestra sounds that are coming from, 70, 80 years ago, just these lush string arrangements. I love when artists choose to play around with wood instruments. I think that, a band like Jethro Tull is so one of a kind for what they brought to the table. The use of wind instruments, and seeing any newer band incorporate that into a contemporary alternative style of rock and roll, pop music, whatever it might be. It's the eclectic nature, knowing that you're engaging with artists that really do appreciate the past, what's come before them, what's been established, and admiring that and building off of it. And so I love what Kim is doing on this record with regards to that, giving that orchestration her own style. There are tracks here that really feel like a total 180 when you consider her catalog of music. But then there's also stuff that is incredibly grounded in that alternative 90s rock and roll sound, very indie driven, lots of fuzzy guitars, lots of textures and layers in those guitars, playing around with different riffs. And then there's just some moments where, she just does her own thing. She's playing around with some industrial textures a little bit on the song that I really like is Big Ben Beat. That is just, that song is something else. It comes at you hard and heavy. And I really appreciate her lyrical approach on this record as well. She's the type that's always been very, very curt, I feel like, in your face. And she's backing that off. She's always been introspective as well. She's always been someone that's been solid in providing a sense of perspective through her lyricism. So I think that with this record, being older now, mellowing out a little bit, seeing that incorporated into her style sonically, but also lyrically, writing some really nice pieces, some personal stuff, and just some songs like the second track, Coast, is just a perfect example of a song that, with the title and with what it's doing sonically, it takes you right to where it says it's going to the coast, to the ocean, to that state of relaxation. And think of it as either a figurative or literal coast, but figuratively speaking, I always think of and I hate to bring up a commercial, but this time of year with the holidays, there's that classic Corona commercial where the guy is whistling and he just lights the single basically strand of lights in the palm tree, and it's just his take on Christmas. And that commercial's been around for decades, and there's a reason that it's such a staple for that brand this time of year. And I feel that it's a lot like music and a lot like artistry, and talking about someone like Kim and the style that she's developed, I really I dig the way that this album is so grounded in what she's brought to the table over decades of being so influential as an artist, but also doing something different than the Breeders, doing something different than just what she did with the Pixies, and really putting herself out there to have some fun and to experiment with some different sounds. And I think that she just succeeded admirably with this effort. And I think it's up there as far as record of the year is. As I start to put my list together and as I'm starting to look at some other lists, I can definitely see this popping up, maybe even in some people's top 10, to each their own. I think that this is a pretty incredible record as far as the diverse nature of sounds that it's bringing to the table within, her rock and roll scope. So check that record out. Review will be up shortly. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Talking about Father John Misty as well, releasing Mahashmashana. And a remarkable record. I think that this is an artist that it just continues to be so spellbinding with both lyrical and musical experience, and the combination of the two really just makes for just an exceptional and always an eager anticipation when I see him putting out new music. Talk with the title that it's a Sanskrit word for great cremation ground. So there's a lot of people suggesting that maybe this is his last record under the moniker. I don't think it is. And even if it is, it's, it'd be great to see what he comes out and what he comes up with next, because he is so diverse. But I think the moniker works because this record, perfect example of the experience. It feels like you're going to church when you listen to the guy. You laugh, you cry. There's, big soaring sonic moments. There's moments where you just feel so flush full of emotion, and then you're just exhausted. And then you find your second wind. You find the ability to get back in and continue on. And it's he's just something special. There's very few artists out there like him that continue to push themselves, continue to not take things too serious, which I love that. I love his take on life, just the kind of absurdity that is life, that is nature, us all being here on this big old rock that's just floating through space around a big old burning ball of gas. It's a funny thing to think about, and I enjoy that. Father John Misty, not just poetic, but also bringing some really fun invention to his sound, as far as taking what he did off Chloe in the Next 20th Century and providing more of a familiar feel with that kind of 70s folkish breezy rock and roll element that I feel he's most well known for under this moniker. I feel like previous records definitely more of a folk drive to those. But the thing about Father John Misty is that he's had the opportunity to open up and experiment and do whatever he wants, and he just keeps pushing the barrier. I feel even on this record, as much as there is a sense of familiarity, it's much like Kim Deal's new project. There's still the sonic push, the desire to try something different and to form, I guess, a different page, a different essence of a musical catalog. And with that in mind, we are going to bring up the album of the week, Rubber Soul by the Beatles. This is, I guess I'm just going to lead it off with my own personal story, talking about the UK recording and the American recording, which is something that as a kid I was unaware of when I started collecting wax. And so I am one of those people that for the longest time I thought that this record led off with I've Just Seen a Face, and that is not the case. That's the American recording that I bought, that I purchased, and it wasn't until years later that a buddy of mine were sitting there and hanging out. I'd just gotten in from out of town, just flew in and was unpacking my stuff. And he's like, let me put on some Beatles, and he puts on Rubber Soul. And, hearing Drive My Car, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, what are you doing? This isn't Rubber Soul. And he was like, yeah, it is. What are you talking about? Shows me the cover. I see the track list. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And it was at that point that we had, smartphones, enough technology that we went and looked it up and we're like, oh yeah, there's the UK recording and the American recording. Unbeknownst to both of us, it's just a funny example of the time and place, the pre-internet space where it just wasn't that easy to sit there and look at these things or know this information at all. I had no idea, but I love the experience that I had with the American release of this record, released on December 6th, 3 days after the UK pressing. We're focusing on the original release date and the original pressing, but I love the one thing I don't like about the American recording is that you're getting 2 fewer songs, which is unfortunate. You don't get Think for Yourself, you don't get Nowhere Man, and instead of Drive My Car, you get I've Just Seen a Face. And then the American version is going to lead off with It's Only Love. And as opposed to the UK version, you get What Goes On, which I think is a fun song. And I think it's great giving Ringo a turn on the vocals on that particular track. But I loathe the fact that you don't get If I Needed Someone. And I think as a penultimate track, especially showing off George Harrison's burgeoning songwriting prowess. It's an exceptional track. It's always been one of my favorite Beatles songs, and it bums me out that it's not on that American recording. But it's the 2 records are a fascinating experience in and of themselves. This record is basically, I'd say, the starting point, the reason why this channel, not even just from a namesake standpoint, but why this channel conceptually exists. This is an album where you really had a group of cats come together, and they weren't just pushing the envelope from a standpoint of their songwriting. It was about the entity as a whole. It was about creating an album, song after song after song that wasn't just marvelous to listen to and wasn't just ready to knock everybody off their socks once it hits the radio, but also to have continuity, to have complexity in that regard with the way that one composition is moving, not just even sonically, but thematically from one to the other. And, you have the most famous example, Pet Sounds, Brian Wilson hearing this record and wanting to emulate that. And so many other artists, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks. This record broke that ground as far as the album being this new artistic medium and the potential for it to be something so much bigger than it had been. I also love the Beatles and their shift towards their love for the studio. And this record, certainly not the best example through their catalog, but showing those, beginning signs of messing around with the studio and its potential to do so many different things that are limited in the scope of live music. And while I love, I love checking out a band live, there's nothing I feel that's more transcendental than, punching your ticket, walking into a venue and just, seeping in to one of your favorite entertainers, one of your favorite bands for that period of time and just letting everything go. But with the studio presence and with that direction and that concept, there's something to be said. And again, it's that focus on the album as an art form. It's not, it's not about being able to replicate what we're doing live on stage. It's about pushing the barriers of what we're able to do sonically with this equipment. And so I love that about this record. I love the introduction of the sitar from George Harrison and the influence of Eastern music as that began to take a hold of not just their songwriting process, but also their spiritual process as well. And the way that these guys chose to branch out. A lot of people talk about this being the drug album, and yes, it certainly is. It's this is that period of time where the Beatles, more interaction with Bob Dylan, coming off of it's crazy to think coming off of Help. This is their 6th album. Help was released in August 6th, and this was put out in December 3rd. And I mean, just basically through the entirety of their career, it was just bang, bang, bang. Especially in the beginning, it was like 2 albums a year. And to think just not prolific, but also the way that they grew as artists and the way that they grew into arguably the most influential popular music outfit out there, as many people might back that up. There's McCartney. I love his bass playing on this, picking up the Rickenbacker and dropping the hollow body, just getting a fuller bass sound, and really doing some great work on this record, in my opinion. I mean, I think all of these guys, I think that the guitar play between Lennon and George Harrison is phenomenal, and Ringo, so immensely underrated. Just some really fun stuff that he's providing on the skins and carrying these tracks. This is an album that it's crazy to think in the U.S. when this thing came out, in its first 9 days, it moved 1.2 million copies. The main medium was wax back then, so 1.2 million records back in 1965. Just completely blew away expectations and set a new precedent as far as, the album not just being better artistically because there's more concept, there's more material, there's just more to love in general, right? Versus a 45, but also showing that it has its commercial appeal, and that, oh man, and I hate to bring to light making the record executives happy at this point, but if they're happy and there's they see something, they witness something, obviously they're going to roll with that. And so there's this level of had that not been there, that success, that who knows what the future of the album medium would have held at that time. But the history is written, it is what it is. I love the imagery. We like to talk about that as well. The vinyl packaging is so important because there is that artistic element to it. And Robert Freeman took the photograph. It was in Lennon's garden, and basically what happened was he had the shot in a projector, had it up on a vinyl-sized piece of cardboard, and that cardboard tilted. And so when that happened, there was the elongated image, and the Beatles were like, heck yeah, let's roll with that. And I think that there's so many things visually that are so important and so key to that cover, why it's so good. It's their first record that doesn't say the Beatles is definitely a testament to their level of fame at that point. But also, again, I think that the idea is that without the name of the band on there and just Rubber Soul, there's this drive for the consumer to view it as just this entity. It's like, nah, like just forget about the Beatles. Like this is Rubber Soul. Forget about everything that we've done prior to this for a moment and enjoy this piece of work within its own space, within its own context. And obviously the sort of psychedelic elongated imagery of their heads is also, kind of a green light to the fact that, yes, these guys were definitely indulging in marijuana and in psychedelic drugs and growing personally, artistically from that standpoint. It's pretty well known that McCartney was not at this point, and there was kind of some tension because of that. But yeah, it's a record that, like, I love the way that it bridges new Beatles to old Beatles. There's something quaint, and there's something in its simplicity where I've read critics, judge this record and be harsh on it for being bland, for not being that exciting, for being this weird kind of space in between, sheer pop sound and that, progressive psychedelia that we saw in later Beatles albums. But I think the songwriting on this record is incredible. Sonically, again, the harmonies that are at play, the guitar exchanges that are at work between Harrison and Lennon. I think that I think that this is a record too that it's just the continuity is so impressive. And getting into the track run, Drive My Car. So we're going to talk about the UK pressing first, and then we'll get into the American pressing for just a moment and kind of run down the difference. But opening up with Drive My Car, and one of the signature Beatles songs. Love the piano element, dueling guitars that open are sick on this thing. McCartney comes in with that bass, and this is a song that very Beatlesque, but it's got a different energy. There's definitely a different feel behind this track right out the gate. This band dropping something, letting you know that the future is about to be very different, and it's a compelling lead. As I have gotten older and as I go between the UK and the American release, I think that I am overall more inclined to the UK release and it opening up with Drive My Car, just because of the energy and because of the way that it ushers in this new era Beatles. Norwegian Wood, This Bird Has Flown is your second track, a Lennon composition that does feature George Harrison on the sitar there. Beautiful component there to a song that, it's pretty simple. So I love the melody, I love the riff, but these guys sitting around and knowing that that the track needed something more, just that extra layer, that extra texture, and George picking up that sitar and doing what he did. This is just a light, airy folk guitar. The Mixolydian melody, it creates this kind of like drone-like effect. So I really like the way that comes into play with the sitar. Very complimentary, and just a classic, pretty song. You Won't See Me is your third track. Upbeat, piano driven. Love the simple guitar element. You got this just really solid Motown groove that's driving this track. I love the harmonies that are at play there. The great middle eight that appears in that song is a real nice feature. Nowhere Man is your fourth track. It's almost like spooky, dreamlike vocal with the harmonies as they come in. It's I've always found that opening kind of just off-putting a little bit, but it ushers in this breezy acoustic drive, more literary than lyrical, and I love that. I love that about this record, is that you get the Beatles branching out of just writing simple love songs, and even when they are writing about love, thematically the ideas are more complex. They're from different perspectives, and there's a maturation that is no doubt there in the lyrical qualities of these songs. But I love the Birds vibe that's always carried that track as well. It's a really pretty number. Think for Yourself is your fifth song. Sonically driven lyrics. You got that signature fuzzy bass on this track that I've always been a fan of, which is a solid rock and roll feel. And it's the dawning of a new age with the lyrical content, with the aggressive rock and roll nature of that song, and George just showing off his songwriting prowess. I'm glad that on this full run he gets two tracks, and it's a pattern that we would continue to see throughout Beatles releases. The Word is your sixth song, Lennon composition here. Get this psychedelic, bouncy piano. It is infectious and impossible to forget once you've heard it. But I love the just kind of like screeching guitar that's at work there in the verses. It takes a harder guitar-driven turn, at parts, and I like the back and forth. And McCartney, as far as his bass playing on this song, is just absolutely sick. I really enjoy the driving bass number on that. Michelle, excuse me, is your seventh track. It's going to close out the A-side McCartney numbers. Just a sorrowful acoustic ballad, signature harmonies. You get these French lyrics that it's kind of a comedic take on the language barrier. And immediately just from that component that this is a song about a failed love, two people that there's that initial attraction, but there's just, this desperation, this longing, knowing that it's never going to be, and it's tragic, but also, again, very, very nicely done. I think it's a fun element to their songwriting. It's going to lead into the B-side opener, What Goes On. This is, just Ringo bringing the vocals on us. I love the country flair of this song. It's got great energy. I think that versus It's Only Love, which, is a phenomenal song, but I think that What Goes On just picks up the energy starting off the B-side and gives the album better momentum after all these years and having thrown back and forth. It's just the conclusion that I've come to. Girl is your second song, has this Greek Italian folk vibe to it, conjures these, images of an old world, and just, the image of a beautiful woman walking through that scene. It really is very cinematic in that regard. Dig the strength of the track for that reason, but it's also, drug fueled as well too. There's people that say, and maybe they're correct, I don't know, but it sounds like John Lennon's actually, hitting a marijuana joint when he is taking that, those big breaths and saying "girl." It's I think he sounds more exasperated than anything, but that's just me. I'm Looking Through You is your third song on the B-side. A beautiful number, just a pretty acoustic-driven jam that gets a little psychedelic and soul flair from time to time as the song moves. It's got just a great middle eight component to it as well. But one of my favorite songs on this record, and a perfect example of the strength of their songwriting, really working with. I don't want to call the track minimal necessarily, but the composition isn't. It is pretty simple as far as the elements and what they come together and do. And I've always been impressed with that track for that reason. In My Life is another one as well. Lennon, you got that signature riff that opens up this gorgeous, but, pensive and mournful track. I mean, the feelings are like, this track is so evocative, and it conjures up these feelings of reflection that are just, it's impossible to ignore the power, the strength of this song in that regard. It's got that signature Baroque piano solo, which is pretty cool. It was recorded at half speed, and when they sped it up, it gave it that sound. So I really like the, it's a perfect example of this band seeing the potential in the studio and what they can do, what they can bring to life. Wait is your fifth track, just a hard rocking, great, like, Beatles rock song. Like, it's a track that embodying that simplicity, but I've always loved the guitar play and the melody that's at work on this. And for a number of years, it served as the penultimate track on this record. But knowing that, with the UK version, If I Needed Someone, your penultimate track, it's like, I love the 12-string open on that Rickenbacker 12-string. It's just got that jangly, psychedelic feel, again, conjuring up sounds of the Byrds. It's airy, experimental, just a majestic sign of what is to come for this band, and one of my favorite Beatles songs. I really love what Harrison did with that track. And then Run for Your Life, which is driving acoustic rhythm jam. It's got that signature riff that works in and out of the song. And in a controversial one, I think that lyrically, this is the one moment on the record, and it seems weird closing it out too, where, people were like, wow, there's all this reflection and sentimentality and really nice thoughts. And then there's this kind of like weird element of like creepy misogyny to cap this record. So I've always found that fascinating with this project. And that's going to, finish up the track summation there. And again, the American version to wrap this thing up, but just a few thoughts on that. I've always felt that leading off with I've Just Seen a Face and leading off the B-side with It's Only Love, you have an album that really is much more folk driven. I really feel like, you have the absence of Drive My Car, Nowhere Man, What Goes On, and If I Needed Someone, which really, all the strength in those tracks, I would say, relies kind of in their upbeat, progressive, experimental flair up to that point with regards to what the Beatles had done. You don't get those four tracks, so the American version becomes this more self-contained, folk-driven experience. And after this point in time, you could say that Norwegian Wood would serve as a single. Michelle is the song that most people commonly refer to as the single. In My Life, I know that, that song has been used in a number of films over the years. It is pretty popular and, subtly ubiquitous in popular culture. But there isn't a single, think of like Beatles best of collections. There isn't a single track on this American release. And again, maybe except for Norwegian Wood, that would make that track listing. And I think that is what is so fascinating about this project. A band that such commercial appeal and so crazed and putting out singles and taking that angle and then releasing this album in a market that can be very difficult to be successful in, a market that they'd already tapped in and had success in, and now they're switching things up with this project. And I've just always found it fascinating that it had the success that it did, based on, call it the shortcomings, call it the differences, call it what you will. At this stage in the game, yeah, I do prefer the UK version, but from time to time, it's really fun to throw on the American version of this record to have that folk-driven, self-contained experience. And I think that there's just more of kind of this, sentimental reflection on relationships and love with that experience in and of itself. But that is going to wrap things up for the show this week. Rubber Soul, your album of the week. Listen to both versions. Listen to the UK version. Listen to the US version. Tell me what you think. Which one's your favorite? What you like about the differences? What you don't like about each of them in the layout. I'm curious to see what your thoughts are. But in the meantime, stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. And you guys, please sign up for new memberships. That starts at 99 cents per month, and that will feature the deep cut of the day starting Mondays. We're going to do that Monday through Friday, starting at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next time on the Beat Sessions.